November 28th, 1961, in Langley, Virginia. John F. Kennedy stood in front of the assembled Central Intelligence Agency and pinned the National Security Medal on the chest of Allen Dulles, the man who built the CIA, the man who ran it longer than anyone before or since. The president shook his hand. Everybody clapped. The next morning, the White House released Dulles' resignation letter, and that is a masterclass on how you fire a spy. You give him a medal in front of his own people, and then the next morning, give the press his resignation letter. Allen Dulles would call that spring the disaster that ended him, or the worst day of his life. And in my opinion, he would develop a bit of a grudge and carry that with him for what came next. 2 years later, JFK's head did that in Dallas. He was shot in an open car in front of hundreds of people on film. And when the government picked 7 men to investigate the murder of the president, sitting at the table was Allen Dulles, the man that Kennedy had fired and the man whose life's work Kennedy tried to take apart. And this is just public information. Nobody hid this at all. It was just announced. This is all available, guys. So who do you think killed JFK? Comment down below. I know a lot of people are going to say the mafia, the mob, right? That's kind of the word on the street. A lot of people are going to say Oswald acted alone. He's an evil, bad commie. Lots of people are going to also say it was just the government. I want you right now in this video to comment below who you think killed JFK. And then we'll talk about it again at the end of this video because we got a lot to cover. Quick break, guys. My sponsor for this video is Cloaked, and they've asked me to do something that I've been putting off for a long time, which is to go to their site, type in my phone number, and see what's actually out there on me. Don't leave my phone number. I have yet to look at this, so whatever comes up, you're seeing what I'm seeing. Oh, good. My social security number. That's pretty cool. It's just for sale. Anyone can just buy my social security number right now and pretend to be me. But even if you pretend to be me, you don't get to live my life. Data brokers are a real industry making billions of dollars selling this type of information, data. Technically, you consented to it somewhere in a terms of service many years ago, but you don't read those. They're like the Planet Fitness of evil data collection. Hopefully, you just sign up and forget. Cloaked does the removal for you. They find where your data is being sold and they get that shit taken down. But also, there's a cool app. It makes unlimited burner emails, usernames, and phone numbers, so new signups get fake info. It's like a reverse scam. These accounts work like real accounts. You can call, text, and email from them inside the app, but none of it traces back to little old you or little old me. So when a broker scrapes it and sells it, they're selling a big pile of shit, and they're getting their whole business tainted. And somebody's paying for that shit. It's the tables turning. Cloaked does some other stuff too, like dark web monitoring, so you know if your info leaks out there in the dark web. Take that, bad guy! With a built-in VPN, a password manager, AI spam call filtering, and $1 million identity theft insurance policy. Go to cloaked.com/Oompaville, put in your phone number, get a free scan. It only takes a few seconds. You'll see if your social security number is out there right now like mine is. This stuff gets bought and sold constantly, so the longer you sit on it, the more is out there. Go to cloaked.com/Oompaville. It will get you 30% off any plan. It's in the description and the pinned comment. Thank you to Cloaked for sponsoring this video. Thank you to you guys. To start, we have to forget the grassy knoll for a minute. We have to forget the forums and the conspiracies, the documentaries, and the books. There is a plethora of reasons to believe a conspiracy angle that live in the government's own paper trail. Things that the government did in writing on the record over and over and over for 62 years. The official story is still a story that makes my eyes pop out of my head, because you couldn't have made it any more suspicious. The month that JFK died, pollsters went out and asked Americans a simple question. Do you think that Oswald acted alone? 62% of Americans at the time said no, that somebody else was involved. And that number has moved around over the last 60 years, but it has never dropped below half. So from the very beginning of this tragedy, more than half of everybody asked believed that Oswald didn't just act alone, and that the official story, which has a few iterations, isn't the full story. At the peak of this number of distrust, 81% of this country believed that the assassination assassination of John F. Kennedy was a conspiracy. And as of the 60th anniversary, it's still 65%, and the official story is the fringe position. The official story is the least believed. And what's a tad bit confusing and makes my eyes pop out again is that the government investigated the murder a second time, and that investigation ended with Congress calling it a probable conspiracy. Congress never took that back, by the way. There's a great deal of mistrust with the government nowadays, with the whole Epstein stuff. The official story almost never matches with any of this. And with the John F. Kennedy situation, the crime of the century, it is very much similar to the Epstein situation, in which they could just release all the files and we would just know. And they just did that last year, and they still didn't release all of them. It's fucking insane. It's insane. Anyways, in today's video, I'm going to show you what the evidence actually says about who killed Kennedy, and the evidence, I've got to say, is pretty clear. There's a ton of sources, there's a ton of misinformation, but it's there. I feel like it's there. And I'm also going to show you what the government did with that evidence, because those two stories are very different stories, but they culminate into one extreme level of disbelief by the American people. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why 2 out of 3 Americans refuse to believe the official story of who shot JFK. So we gotta go way back. The CIA of 1963 is prime MK Ultra era CIA. The agency is actively dosing their own people and people with LSD without their consent. It's overthrowing governments, Iran in 53, Guatemala in 54, with more on the whiteboard. And the CIA at this time is trying over and over again to assassinate Fidel Castro, not in vague, deniable ways, but rather really obvious and obtuse, dumb plans, stupid like this. And of all the officially documented CIA plots against Castro's life, 2 of them sound pretty familiar. 1, mob contract killers, and 2, poison pills. That's less familiar, but still pretty familiar, because the last video we did the Tylenol murders. Anyways, fun factoid, the Senate documented about 8 separate CIA plots against Castro's life, but the head of Cuban counterintelligence claimed the true number of schemes was 638. And I'm honestly gonna believe the Cubans on this one, fellas and fellettes. Press like button, smash like, subscribe. The genius behind all this was Allen Dulles. He was there before the CIA was the CIA. He was recruited into the OSS during World War II, in which it was an incredible intelligence gathering agency and major part of that war. He became the agency's first civilian director and the architect of the whole modern intelligence community. Without Allen Dulles, American spying as we know it today would not exist. He built it. It was his to an extent. Then came the Bay of Pigs. April 1961, a CIA-trained force of anti-Castro Cubans hit the beach in Cuba, and that force failed in front of the entire world, and we were embarrassed. Kennedy is only 90 days into his presidency, and his intelligence agency has just handed him a pure international disaster. Afterward, the New York Times reported that Kennedy told one of his own aides he wanted to splinter the CIA into 1,000 pieces and scatter it to the winds. Now, whether or not he said those exact words, there is a litany of evidence and paper trail showing that he meant that and he wanted to do that. He had his own people study how to break the agency's functions apart, and he restructured it so that for the first time the CIA answered up a chain that ended at the president's desk. And guess what? They didn't like that very much. Then came Dulles' resignation. He was forced out. You have the medal, the handshake, the letter, the worst day of his life. And later, while Dulles worked on an article defending his operation, his editor, Willie Morris, claimed to have heard Dulles saying exactly what he thought of the young, handsome President JFK, the hero of the PT-109. Willie heard Dulles say, "That Kennedy, he thought he was a god." Now, I mentioned the PT-109, but we've got to be very clear on who Dulles was talking about here, okay? Kennedy was a genuine war hero. He commanded the PT-109, a torpedo boat in World War II. A Japanese destroyer split that vessel in half, and Kennedy had to swim to a fucking remote island. He put his belt in his mouth and fucking swam. He was on the Harvard swim team, and he swam. This guy had really bad burns. But anyways, the PT-109, the Navy and Marine Corps medal, a Purple Heart. He was a man who swam wounded through open ocean, towing a crewman by a life jacket strap, biting on it with his fucking teeth. He looked at what the CIA was doing around the world, and he wanted it brought to heel. You know, cause he's moral, maybe, I guess? I don't know. Now, why would you want to kill Kennedy? I don't know, let's see. The man at the center of the killing of Kennedy was Lee Harvey Oswald. And the truest thing that you could say about Lee Harvey Oswald is that his whole life is the type of life that you could expect something maybe like this would happen. He's gonna end up in a file and he's not gonna go super far. Born in Nolens in 1939, 2 months after his father died. He went through 12 schools before he just kind of gave up, or his family just gave up. He had a stretch in a children's home and a psychological evaluation at 13 that found a kid with severe emotional difficulties. At 17 years of age, he lied his way into the Marine Corps, where he learned to shoot, and we have to be very honest and open about this because it's kind of a pillar of the whole idea of this story. Really, in the Marine Corps in 1956, Lee Harvey Oswald qualified as a sharpshooter, which is a middle tier with a score of 212. By 1959, his last evaluation, he'd slipped down to 191, which is 1 point above the floor for marksman, which is the lowest passing grade the Marine Corps can give. So, very important. He can shoot, but not that well. Then he defected to the Soviet Union, which is really not a thing that many people did in the United States at that time. The Soviets didn't particularly want him, so he came back with a Russian wife, Marina. Now, the rifle. In March of 1963, under a fake name, A. Heidel, Oswald clipped a coupon from a gun magazine and ordered an Italian military surplus Carcano. It was $21.45, shipping included. That's a fucking great deal. You can only get like 4 bags of candy for that. He had that delivered to a P.O. box. That April, he used it. He propped it on a fence line outside the home of General Edwin Walker, a far-right segregationist that he despised, and fired at his head through a dining room window. He missed by an inch. Maybe it was deflected by the window frame. Certainly was. Shooting through windows doesn't work that well in real life. And we know that this was Oswald who attempted this murder because Marina testified that he confessed to her that night, and because he'd left her a note in Russian with instructions in case he was captured. So that's Lee Harvey Oswald. And that is the motherfucker who is carrying a long paper package, mysteriously gun-shaped, into work on the morning of November 22nd, 1963, with his co-worker Buell Wesley Frazier driving him in. Frazier asked about the package. Oswald said it was a curtain rod. At 12:30 in the afternoon, President Kennedy's motorcade rolls through Dealey Plaza, past the Texas School Book Depository where Oswald worked and where a coworker later testified he'd seen him on the 6th floor a half hour earlier. 3 shots in roughly 8 seconds. Of the witnesses who counted, 79% heard exactly 3. President is hit in the back of the head. The governor of Texas, John Connally, sitting in the jump seat ahead of him, is hit through the chest, wrist, and thigh. Kennedy is dead within the hour. 45 minutes later, across town, a Dallas patrolman named J.D. Tippett pulls his squad car along a man walking fast down a residential street. The man shoots him 4 times and runs. About a dozen people see it happen or see the gunman flee. The shooter then ducks into the Texas Theater without buying a ticket, and when the police come down the aisle looking for him, he pulls a revolver. It's Lee Harvey Oswald. And you might say, well, obviously, but like, not that obvious, because something that's a little bit important that is a recurring theme in all of this is that the 4 bullets that were pulled from Officer Tippett were too mangled to conclusively match Oswald's revolver, but the 4 shell casings he dumped on the ground were matched to Oswald's revolver to the exclusion of every other weapon on Earth. The theme here is that Lee Harvey Oswald has some of the strangest luck with ammunition that you will ever see or hear of. Anyways, that night, they walk him past the cameras in the police station hallway with a split lip, one eye going black. You've seen the photograph. You may not have heard him say this, though.
I'm just a patsy.
You know what a patsy is? This is what a patsy is. Now, luckily, just after saying this incredibly suspicious line, Oswald got to explain exactly what he meant. Just kidding, he never got to explain that. 2 days later, on Sunday morning, November 24th, they're transferring Oswald to the basement of the Dallas Police Headquarters, and NBC is carrying it live. At 11:21 a.m., a local nightclub owner named Jack Ruby, a hero, an American hero, steps out of the crowd of reporters and shoots Oswald in the stomach on live national television, the first murder ever broadcast live in American history. Oswald died at Parkland Hospital, the same hospital that Kennedy died at. And that's it. That is the entire judicial history of the assassination of JFK. No trial, no cross-examination, no verdict. The defendant is dead, the case is closed, and the truth just is about whoever reports it. There's nobody left. Thank God. Right? No. Bad. Bad. Guess who wrote the report? To educate your guess, we got to walk you through one Sunday morning, hour by hour, because I'm not sure most people realize how much of this story happened on a single day. Sunday, November 24th, 1963, in Bethesda, Maryland. Commander James Humes, the Navy pathologist who performed the president's autopsy 2 nights earlier, is standing at the fireplace in his own recreation room, and he's burning his autopsy papers. The original notes stained with the president's blood and his first handwritten draft of the report. He's burning them. He'll say later he did it because he couldn't stand the thought of papers soaked in Kennedy's blood ending up in a display case. And that makes sense from a human, empathetic perspective and viewpoint. From a Navy doctor who'd had the worst week of his career, it's just a shame. A lot of people loved JFK, but the reality is he burned original medical evidence in the murder of a president at home, alone in his fireplace, and then signed a piece of paper admitting it. That certification, that's in a display case. That still exists. And while those pages are burning in Bethesda, in Dallas, Jack Ruby is stepping out of a crowd and shooting the out of Lee Harvey Oswald. And that same day, Oswald's body still not yet cold, J. Edgar Hoover, director of the FBI, dictated a memo. This is a real document that was released in 2017. You can read it for yourselves. Hoover wrote, "The thing I'm concerned about, and so is Mr. Katzenbach, is having something issued so we can convince the public that Oswald is the real assassin." Good choice of words, FBI director. Let's convince the public. That's the FBI director in his own words on the day that the suspect died, describing a goal of an investigation not as justice and finding out who the did this, but rather as public relations in convincing the public on who did this. I feel very comfortable characterizing all of that in that way and characterizing Hoover as a bad guy because that's his own memo and he's a huge piece. The next day, the day of the president's funeral, Hoover's counterpart at the Justice Department, a fellow by the name of Nicholas Katzenbach, put it even more plainly in a memo to the White House. He said, "The public must be satisfied that Oswald was the assassin, that he did not have confederates who are still at large." Katzenbach defended that memo for the rest of his life. He said he was trying to kill rumors of a Soviet plot before they started a war. And to be fair, in November 1963, that was a very real fear. We're just off the heels of the Cuban Missile Crisis, and we're at the peak of the Cold War. It's fair. It's fair. It's fair. But if you read the words, it's open to interpretation. All right, guys. It's a conclusion that's written down. It's official before an investigation even happened or existed. Okay, so it looks also as well. Lyndon B. Johnson, the former vice president. Texas is obsessed with LBJ, by the way. I know, I guess he's from here or whatever I don't care. He had a big cock. That's kind of cool.
Now, another thing, the crotch down where your nuts hang is always a little too tight. So when you make them up, give me an inch that I can let out there. You never do have much margin there. But see if you can't leave me about an inch from where the zipper ends, round under my, back to my bunghole.
Old Big Dick assembled 7 men under Chief Justice Earl Warren, and one of those 7 men is Allen Dulles. Oh, God. Why, bro? Why? The man that Kennedy fired, investigating the murder of Kennedy, sitting in judgment of the agency he personally built. Genius! There's a few documented ways to interpret this. The version that you will hear from the conspiracy channel is that the CIA smuggled their man in. But the documented truth, in a sense, is a bit stranger and kinda worse. The suggestion to put in Dulles came through the Kennedy's own side. Bobby Kennedy's people put Dulles' name forward. Bobby Kennedy, JFK's brother, also kind of a fucking American hero that was also murdered by the government, it seems like. Dulles was an establishment man that they seemed to trust. Nobody really even needed to plant him, they just put him there. Allegedly. Of course, allegedly. It's very convenient. And Bobby Kennedy died not long after in also very suspicious circumstances. So it's a weird thing to do, and they just consistently can't imagine that this is an issue. But it seemed like Dulles took the job very seriously. Earl Warren himself said later, "I don't think Ellen Dulles ever missed a meeting." Who the f would miss a meeting about the investigation of who killed the president? What do you think the commission spent the most time commissioning around? What was their big question? The commission spent months on whether or not Cuba had the motive to kill JFK. Brother, of course Cuba had the motive to kill JFK. Allen Dulles sat there knowing, because he had personally approved it, that the CIA had spent years trying to assassinate Castro. Poison, mob hitmen, poison cigarette, syphilis. You can name it, dude. That would be the most obvious retaliation in the entire world. So the commission was investigating whether a foreign power had reason to strike back at Kennedy, and there was a guy there who knew the reason existed, and guess what he said? He didn't say shit. And Earl Warren died never knowing that, by the way. They just kind of left that shit out. But we found out publicly in 1975. So, pretty epic win there. In September of 1964, the Warren Commission delivered its report. Oswald acted alone. 3 shots from the 6th floor in 8 seconds. No conspiracy. Of course. Have you ever tried to work a bolt 3 times in 8 seconds? I have. It's hard, man. It's hard. It's hard. And have you ever tried to shoot the president and the governor of Texas 3 times in 8 seconds with a bolt action rifle? Because I haven't. And that seems like it'd be harder, though. So, I don't know. Not that many people believe the report. I don't really believe the report. The report seems like kind of like nonsense. It leans on a piece of evidence you probably definitely have heard of. Commission Exhibit 399, or as you've heard it, the magic bullet. It was found nearly intact on a stretcher at Parkland Hospital, and it was credited with passing through Kennedy's neck and then breaking Connolly's rib and wrist. Confusing. And the hospital engineer who found it could never say which stretcher it came off of, and when investigators pushed him to be certain, he refused. He started crying, but the single most famous piece of evidence in the case just f***ing comes into the case without any kind of genuine verification. But it's proof, you know, it's proof. And by the way, LBJ went to his grave unconvinced. He didn't believe that either. In 1969, he told Walter Cronkite on camera that he'd never been fully satisfied that there were no international connections to the assassination of JFK, and CBS had cut that answer from their broadcast, citing national security.
I can't honestly say that I've ever been completely relieved of the fact that there might have been international connections.
The public didn't get to hear LBJ express that for 6 years. In retirement at his ranch in Texas, he said it quite flatly to a former aide. He said, "I never believed that Oswald acted alone." That's like almost Richard Nixon. I don't know what LBJ sounds like. It's kind of like it's kind of a nondescript voice. So the verdict came, but the sitting president at that time, he didn't really believe it, which leaves the question the commission never got to answer. What does the evidence actually say? What makes sense? Starting with the ballistics and starting with the magic bullet first. You see, the reason that CE 399 looks impossible, you know, 1 bullet, 7 wounds, comes out looking like it's never even been shot. The reason is that most people picture Connolly sitting directly in front of Kennedy, so the bullet has to zigzag, but he wasn't. He was in a fold-down jump seat, 3 inches inboard and 4 inches lower, twisted around to his right to look at the crowd. So, if you run a straight line from the 6th floor window through Kennedy's back and throat, and it continues, there are no real turns if you see it this way. There's no magic. The bullet just goes into wounds that make sense and the wounds that Connolly actually took. The magic zigzags only exist in the diagrams that draw the seats wrong. Now, are the diagrams wrong? Is this just a convenient thing that just came way after the fact? It's hard to say, all right? Well, actually, I have a problem-solving heuristic. Bush's razor is that if the story benefits the storyteller, then deception beats coincidence. So, if the requirement is to believe too many coincidences to believe the official story, and the story benefits the storyteller, it's deception, it's fake, it's not real. That's Bush's razor. So we'll apply that problem-solving heuristic that I invented personally to this story and from now on the channel. Comment down below what you guys think of Bush's razor. Now, the bullet staying in one piece is the next thing. Is that suspicious? It's a full metal jacket. It's a military round. It's got a hard shell specifically to punch through soft tissue without deforming. Bullets in the 60s were probably different than bullets now, but I shoot full metal jackets all the time, and they generally deform unless they're traveling very slowly. But you'd have to do like some real scientific to kind of prove that. But the headshot fragmented though. That's a full metal jacket as well, unless he had his magazine loaded up with different types of ammo, which doesn't make any sense. Full metal jackets also do that, guys. In 1964, the Army ran wound ballistic tests, and the government fired the exact Western cartridge ammunition from Oswald's actual rifle into a reconstructed human skull over and over and over again, and it fragmented every single time. So they were pretty scientific with that. As you might expect, both recovered fragments from the fatal shot carry the rifling of Oswald's Carcano, matched by the FBI in 1964 and confirmed independently by a congressional firearms hearing panel in 1978. It was his rifle, nothing else. That was independent confirmation. The FBI confirmation in 64 is a little bit suspicious, but it's confusing that they didn't just say all this though and put all this out. The government possessed test data in 1964 that could prove the impossible magic bullet's behavior was completely reproducible, on demand, and ordinary. But instead, they made the decision to let the country argue about magic for 60 years, okay? Now, how about the shot itself? Pretty hard, but there's a few myths of the timeline. I've heard 8 seconds, I've heard 5.6 seconds. You may have heard the unofficial amount of time. Now, how about the shot itself? It's pretty hard, obviously. I think we can all agree on that. That'd be a tough shot to make, whether it's 8 seconds or the popular 5.6 seconds that you've most likely heard as well. Some people will be mad when I said 8 seconds earlier because there's a bunch of different stories. The official that the consensus, the congressional review landed on, backed by the film, is that Oswald's first shot came early and missed, which gave him more than 8 seconds for the sequence, with the hardest shot being the one he took at leisure. The last shot, the one that mattered, was 88 yards at a car moving 11 miles an hour almost straight away from him. So from a former sharpshooter there with a scoped rifle, that is definitely a shot that could be made for sure. A bunch of people have tried to recreate the shot, some successfully, some unsuccessfully. There's definitely some anomalies among the evidence as well. There's a dented shell casing among the 3 that were found at the window. The one is genuinely dented. That was documented since 1964 and has been argued about ever since. They're the autopsy notes we talked about, which exist as ashes in a fireplace in Bethesda, Maryland. Then there is the president's brain. In 1965, at Bobby Kennedy's request, the autopsy materials were moved in a locked footlocker. In October of 1966, on Halloween, archivists at the National Archives opened the inventory, and the stainless steel container holding the brain of John F. Kennedy was not there, and it has never been found. Decades later, 2 men who'd been in the autopsy room, John Stringer and Francis O'Neill, an FBI agent, looked at the brain photographs in the official archive and disavowed them under oath. So the record around the brain is broken and f***ing disavowed, and the brain is gone. Brother, what? His brain is gone. They had his brain in it. It's gone. They had the brain and it left. It's the bullets, the rifle, the shells, the trajectory. Stuff that points at Oswald is definitely solid. He was certainly involved, probably. It was tested, it's been matched, it's been boring, according to the official story. But the notes, the photographs, the brain, everything that was compromised because of what officials did after the fact. The shooting probably was Lee Harvey Oswald. I don't know if there was a second shooter. All right, I don't know. There's not a lot of evidence of it, okay? The official evidence certainly points to Oswald acting alone. But after the fact, the official evidence points to a scandalous handling of the greatest event of the 20th century. And that doesn't make any sense at all, because the CIA, the FBI, the American government could have done a lot of things to make it look a lot less like they killed the president, that he was killed by his own people. I mean, let's be fucking real. It's pretty embarrassing. So embarrassing for a while that in the 70s, the government looked at all of this again. And the second time, it came back with a very different answer. And it wasn't that it was just Oswald acting alone, guys. And this is somehow something that not that many people know about. Important context, for 11 years, the American public never saw the assassination. They've never seen the film that we've seen. This film, the 26 seconds of film shot by a dressmaker named Abraham Zapruder standing on a concrete pedestal in Dealey Plaza that was bought by Life magazine the day after the assassination for $150,000 and then held for years. The film, locked away. The first time it played for the public at all was in a New Orleans courtroom in 1969, and the first time America saw it was on March 6th, 1975, on late-night television introduced by a young Geraldo Rivera, way before the Satanic Panic and Al Capone vault thing. And the footage made the whole case a lot worse looking because the whole country saw Kennedy's head snap back into the left. Belief in a conspiracy went absolutely fucking skyrocketing vertically. Way on its way up to 81% of people believing in a conspiracy, that Oswald either didn't do it or he didn't act alone. Within a year, the Church Committee had dragged the CIA's secrets into daylight. The assassination plots, the mob contracts, the exploding cigar, that's where all this information came from, was the reinvigoration and interest of the assassination of JFK. And the fact that none of this had ever been told to the Warren Commission was brought up, which is unbelievable. Official Warren Commission report of the lone gunman was written half blind. Congress decided to do the whole thing over. A House Select Committee on Assassinations with subpoena power, with real scientists, geniuses, eggheads as we call them, us jocks. In 1979, that committee, the second official investigation of the United States government, published its finding. And I'm gonna read it to you exact. President John F. Kennedy was probably assassinated as a result of a conspiracy. That is the last word that Congress has ever issued on the murder of JFK. They never rescinded it. It was a conspiracy. I mean, yeah, we think it's a conspiracy, but why is the official story not that it was a conspiracy? They never rescinded it. Well, because the more honest, unfortunate version, because I want it to be a conspiracy really badly. I'm incredibly biased. I have no trust in the government. That committee also concluded that Oswald fired every shot that actually hit Kennedy. So their conspiracy was a fourth shot from the grassy knoll that missed. And that was based on acoustic analysis of a police motorcycle recording, which their experts put at a 95% confidence. The finding was shocking to the committee because they had been drafting another lone gunman report until that audio arrived. So obviously it was debunked, right? It's kind of, yeah. It's one of the most interesting facts in this entire story. The acoustic evidence, the scientific backbone of the official finding of conspiracy in the death of a president from Congress was taken down by a rock drummer from Ohio named Steve Barber, who got the police recording as a cardboard flexi disc in an adult magazine. He played it a few hundred times and he heard something underneath the gunshots. A sheriff's radio voice saying, "Hold everything secure," or words that were said a full minute after the shooting. And if those words are under the shots came a minute too late to be shots. The National Academy of Sciences checked him and agreed unanimously, and in 1982, the Acoustics were officially dead. The Justice Department closed the file in 1988. There was no persuasive evidence of conspiracy, no further investigation. And that memo not with any correction of the record by Congress. That's still their final thing that they said, conspiracy. That's where the government's investigation of the crime of the century actually ends. Just a fucking file closure, because they just did the same shit over and over again and some random dweeb debunked it. So case closed. Wrong. The original acoustic scientist, Dr. James Barger, a nationally honored expert who helped build the Army's sniper detection systems, never accepted the debunk, and in 2021, in a book with the investigator Josiah Thompson, he and a fellow engineer argued the drummer's crosstalk had been overdubbed onto the tape afterward. A physicist who reviewed the book, Nicholas Nolly, shot back that the crosstalk is in every early copy of the tape and that the mainstream still says the acoustics are dead. So, the truth stands somewhere in there. But the original acoustic scientist Barger, who died in 2022, he was still convinced that it was legit. So after all this, we still haven't gotten to the best reason that people believe that this is a conspiracy. Because if there's nothing, just release all the files. If there's not a big deal, release all the files. It's like the Epstein stuff. If it's not a big deal and nobody's implicated, then just release all the files. The government loves files situation, and it just doesn't understand how to just release them. Just how do you deal with a problem when it's easy and the truth is right out there and you could just solve the problem? Just release the fucking files is what you can do. You could just release the fucking files. But alas, why did the CIA spend the next 60 years fighting to bury the files, specifically one file of a dead officer? This last part is very recent. In summer of 1963 in Nolens, Oswald is out on Canal Street handing out pro-Castro leaflets because he's a commie bastard when a Cuban exile named Carlos Bringier confronts him. There's a scuffle. They start punching each other in the head repeatedly like rock'em sock'em robots. Oswald gets arrested, and 12 days later, the two of them debate Castro on local radio. The tape still exists, and we can listen to it.
Do you agree with Fidel Castro when in his last speech of July 26th of this year, he qualified President John Fitzgerald Kennedy of the United States as a ruffian and a thief? Do you agree with Mr. Castro?
I would not agree with that particular wording. However, I and the Fair Play for Cuba Committee does think that the United States government, through certain agencies, namely the State Department and the CIA, has made monumental mistakes in its relations with Cuba.
And that cheeky little street fight is why the world knew within hours of the assassination that Lee Harvey Oswald was a Castro man and he was a commie. His nemesis, Bringier, belonged to an anti-Castro student group called the DRE. If you don't know, a lot of Cubans fucking hate Castro and communism. The DRE was a group funded by the CIA. $25,000 a month, and it was run out of Miami by a psychological warfare officer the students knew only as Howard. The day after the assassination, that group published a broadsheet with Oswald's face next to Castro's under the headline, "The Presumed Assassins." That is literally the first JFK conspiracy theory ever put to print, and it was bankrolled by the CIA. How crazy is that? Every conspiracy theory you've ever heard about this case is descended from one that the CIA paid for. And that fella Howard, his real name was George Joannides. Very important name. 15 years later, when that House Select Committee started digging into CIA connections to anti-Castro groups, the agency assigned an officer to be the committee's liaison, the man who would receive the investigators' file requests and decide what they got to see. These eggheads reached back for a veteran officer. They wanted somebody who knew their shit, and they told the committee's young researchers that this veteran had no connection of any kind to anything that they were investigating. Who'd they choose? Joannides, the DRE's own case officer. Oh, genius. It was the DRE's own case officer. The CIA put the guy that they were unknowingly looking for in charge of the file room for the investigation. And guess what? The files, they never came. The requests, they slowed, then they stalled, then they were refused outright. The committee's chief counsel, Robert Blakey, found out only decades later, and his verdict is on the record. He said, "The CIA not only lied, it actively subverted the investigation." Had he known, Blakey said, Joannides would have never been the liaison. He'd have been a witness under oath. In 1981, the CIA gave George Joannides the Career Intelligence Medal. So, Good for him. That specific citation, by the way, praised his handling of a unusual special assignment. So, for the next 2 decades, a journalist named Jeffrey Morley sued the CIA for the Joannides files. More files, guys. 15 years in federal court, 4 appellate wins, and the agency fought him past Joannides' death and kept on fighting. 3 separate investigations over the decades asked the CIA about a Miami officer called Howard. The agency denied knowing any such man. There's a 1998 memo that does that exact same thing that we can see. Then, on July 3rd, 2025, last year, under pressure from a congressional task force, 62 pages of the Joannides personnel file finally came out. And in that file is a photograph of a fake Washington, D.C. driver's license issued in 1963, January, bearing Joannides' face with the name Howard Mark Gebler. Man, they denied it for 62 years, but it's a little ID right there. Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna, who forced all this stuff out, said that the CIA had been lying about the assassination for 6 decades, and that is true. It's very suspicious, a lot of lies, very scandalous, lots of stuff, but guess what? There isn't in the file. Nothing in the file shows the CIA directing Oswald or knowing explicitly that the assassination was coming. Conveniently, of course. Of course it doesn't say anything about that. Are there any files that still aren't released? I'm sure there's not. What these files do prove is that the agency concealed its connection to the story and deceived Congress about it from 1963 until last year, past every investigation and every court order that it could. Why? Now, in my opinion, one of the strongest and most well put together cases in regard to the JFK conspiracy is less of a case, more of a historian's argument. And that is the argument of Dr. Sean Munger, my favorite YouTuber. He makes great YouTube videos and I recommend you check them out. He made a 2-part multi-hour-long case for the official lone gunman story. I'll have a link to that down below and it's really good. He's very thorough and I just, it makes sense. Dr. Munger's strongest point is the simplest point. If Oswald was an innocent patsy, why would he shoot a policeman 45 minutes after shooting the president? Innocent men don't gun down Officer Tippit on a side street, and every failure of the Warren Commission, the tunnel vision, the withheld files is explained by incompetence and ass covering without needing a single extra hidden gunman, which that makes a lot of sense. My only pushback on Munger is in 1 degree. The shot was harder than he allows it, but it was still certainly makeable, and there's even more proof to back it up. The grassy knoll. You've heard about that a lot, haven't talked about it much in this video. People swore shots came from there because of the head movement and the echo. That's the Zapruder film, the head going left. The grassy knoll. Dealey Plaza is an echo chamber, and ear witnesses are famously unreliable, and the searchers found nothing. No rifle, no shells, not a footprint, a possible second gunman who policed his own brass in front of a panicked crowd and then just fucking evaporated into nothing. How about Castro's revenge? Makes sense, and that was Lyndon B. Johnson's personal favorite. Really made sense to him because they spent years trying to kill the but the first committee didn't find any evidence of it. They didn't know about the whole, murderous ink plot. The second committee did know, and they said probably conspiracy, but they also found no evidence that Cuba was behind it. Same for the mob as an organization. Did they do it? I kind of lean towards that being the most likely out of all the things, and the committee pointedly declined to clear every individual mobster because plenty of people wanted JFK dead. JFK's father's connections to the mob is worth its own video. There's also the theory that George H.W. Bush was the one who shot JFK from the knoll, and he got promoted up the CIA for it, and eventually to the presidency. Now, I don't think he was a great guy, but that seems a little bit far-fetched. Then there was the 3 tramps, the oddly clean-cut vagrants, photographed in police custody near the plaza. For years, people swore one of them was Charles Harrison, a genuine convicted contract killer who murdered a federal judge, and yes, the father of actor Woody Harrelson. But when the arrest records finally surfaced decades later, the tramps turned out to be exactly what they looked like. 3 drifters. Oliver Stone has his entire theory, the everything theory. CIA, the military, exiles mob, all of it. And he made JFK. And that movie rattled the country so much that Congress passed a federal law forcing the assassination files to be opened. A movie did that. That JFK film lionizes Jim Garrison, the New Orleans DA who ran the only prosecution in the case's history, a case built on an alias that the man who invented it testifies was a figment of my imagination. The jury acquitted Clay Shaw in 55 minutes, 2 years to the day after his arrest. Then there's the mortal error, the theory that nobody likes, conspiracy people included, that after Oswald's first shots, that's accepted, a Secret Service agent in the follow-up car swinging up his rifle accidentally fired the headshot and killed the president. It came from a Baltimore gunsmith named Howard Donahue, who spent 25 years on the ballistics. Not one witness in a car with 10 men surrounded by crowds reported that rifle firing. Plus, the fragments seemed to match the Carcano, and the agent sued over the book and reached a confidential settlement. It is very fringe. But this guy is important. He matters to the story for a slightly different reason. In 1967, CBS built a moving sled recreation of the shot to test whether Oswald could have done it. Donahue, the man who believed someone else fired the fatal bullet, stepped up to the rifle and put 3 rounds on target in 5.2 seconds, faster than Oswald needed and faster than the fastest timeline people have agreed upon. The best evidence that Oswald's shooting was humanly possible was produced personally by the man trying to prove that somebody else did it. There's also a novel from the 70s, the Illuminatus trilogy, with the best scene ever written about the case. 5 separate snipers, each working for a different conspiracy, none aware of the others. They all converge on Dealey Plaza to kill Kennedy. That is literally this case. The CIA had motive, Cuba had motive, the mob had motive, half of Washington exhaled when JFK died. Everyone was there in Dallas working together without knowing it. And through the middle of all of them, a 24-year-old with a $21 rifle took the shot alone and actually hit it. So why the f does almost nobody believe that that is the official story, the lone gunman theory? Well, because for 62 years, the government behaved exactly like a government that did it and committed it. And the case is not closed. Still, the brain is missing, the shell is dented, the government's own scientist is unconvinced. LBJ, he thought Cuba did it. There was never an actual trial. And in fact, the man who drove Lee Harvey Oswald to his destination that day, Buell Wesley Frazier, was 19 years old when he gave Oswald the lift to work with that paper package in the back seat. The police had him in a room that same night of the murder, and he says that they put a typed confession in front of him and he refused to sign it. For the last 60 years, through every investigation, every documentary, every anniversary, Frazier has said the exact same thing, that the package that he saw was too short to be the Carcano. The Warren Commission decided that he was probably just mistaken. Maybe he was. Of course, he could have been. We'll never f***ing know, dude. I tell you what. But researching this video has got me a little on edge. I believe the official story. I believe what Sean Munger's videos lay out pretty explicitly, I would say, in a very explanatory, fair way. The government's full of just normal people, bunch of idiots, and they love to save themselves embarrassment. That could explain a lot of everything. Yeah, okay, but man, it still looks suspicious as f. So comment down below, who do you think did it? I'll see you in the next video.